Hi, I just thought I'd make a video as I've not made one for a little while. Partly because I've sort of been struggling a little bit to come to terms with my stay in hospital. I am still waiting for the two other tests which they said that they were going to do, which were a neuropsychological test and a EMG. I was phoned by the neurologist last week to say that I should get an appointment fairly soon, so that's quite good. But actually, I've had a few weeks when my movements have been fairly infrequent, and certainly very few involuntary sounds, apart from one or two now and then. But then this weekend I did more than usual. Had quite a busy weekend, really enjoyed it, going out to places with my wife and my daughter and my grandson. And then yesterday I thought I would go out and do some gardening, which I really enjoyed. And I also did some, I quite like baking, so I did some cooking. I just felt like doing it, and I'd been all right until the evening, and then I suddenly I was sitting watching television, and the next thing I knew I was making involuntary noises, something, as I say, I've hardly done at all, and getting quite a few involuntary jerks. So went to bed last night and slept extremely badly, kept actually waking up from the involuntary movements, which is usually unusual. I don't think I get them in the night, or at least I don't normally notice, but last night I was waking up with involuntary noises, involuntary movements that I was making in my sleep, and probably only slept 4 hours or so last night, I would guess. I know I didn't sleep much, and I was also getting very hot and feverish, even though the room was actually quite cold. I felt as if all the heating was on. Well, this is really what you'll see now is the result of a whole weekend of activity. I'm never not active. In fact, I think I've said before, I go for a walk during the week every day. Sometimes overdo it a little bit, but I do generally know how far I can push things. But this weekend I just wanted to do so much and tried, and these are the effects. So I have been reconsidering the possibility of having myalgic encephalomyelitis, and I recently come across a book by Dr. Byron Hyde, which is, if I can show it properly, which is the clinical and scientific basis for myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. And this really is a brilliant book, and it traces myalgic encephalomyelitis back to the 1930s, when it was originally seen during a poliomyelitis outbreaks, and it was originally called atypical poliomyelitis because symptoms were so alike polio, but without certain elements like death and permanent paralysis. So anyhow, Dr. Byron gives detailed descriptions of how it develops. Dr. Byron Hyde has over 25 years experience with investigating epidemic and then endemic cases of myalgic encephalomyelitis. one of the interesting things he says in his book, that often patients that he sees have a relative who had polio at some point. Well, and he thinks it's suggestive that there is a genetic susceptibility to enteroviruses, although there's still no definite evidence that enteroviruses are the cause of it. There is a lot of suggestive evidence, and anyhow, my father had poliomyelitis and had a withered foot. So again, that does leave some credibility. And he was also says that often 2 years before, up to 2 years before, there's a minor illness that comes that has many of the symptoms of ME, particular. And strangely enough, I can remember 2 years ago having like a post-viral illness, which lasted a few weeks. Where I was with this, I was just quite felt dizzy. And was easily fatigued, but I got over it and got back to work. He also talks about there being a couple of stages to acute myalgic encephalomyelitis, and when I look back at the beginning of those 2 years, although my memory is actually quite not that brilliant, it's that there are some things that do make it suggestive. I think my biggest problem has been that the most people that I have seen with ME have been people who have been bedridden, which I've never been, and many, because there's this confusion between chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, most of them seem to concentrate on fatigue, and although I have fatigability in that I can't sustain anything for long, tiredness has not been a symptom. When I did the initial questionnaire to go and see the chronic fatigue doctor, it was all about whether I fell asleep when I was in the car, whether I fell asleep during the afternoon. It was all about tiredness, and none of it really applied. But of course, the criteria they use is in England for chronic fatigue syndrome is the Oxford criteria, and it's all about fatigue. It's all about being tired. So anyone who has any neurological symptoms, they're immediately taken out of the equation. Interestingly, in this particular book, it talks about there being a number of different types of onset for myalgic encephalomyelitis, one of them being a central nervous system onset, with many of the symptoms that I suffered initially and am still suffering. So that's quite interesting. So I still am not really any clearer. In fact, if I had definitely got ME and has gone to the National Neurological Hospital at Queen Square, where I had my stay a few weeks ago, it wouldn't have made any difference, because they consider it to be a psychiatric illness, although there is over 2,000 plus papers to show the physical problems, the physical damage that is caused in patients with ME, but although Queen Square is a neurological hospital, they consider it to be a psychiatric problem. So it would have done me no good. So anyhow, I'm still in the case of no real certainty, although I'm coming more to believe, having read this book, that it is possible that I have got ME, but I'm still not certain. So anyhow, again, this is just really to show you what a few days of activity do to me. I know I don't normally make videos when I'm particularly well, but this is how I am after a weekend. And if anyone's interested in getting a copy of this book, please feel free to write to me. You can get a copy if you're in America from www.nightingale.ca. They've got copies there, and if you in the UK, and copies of it are really expensive if you go to Amazon, over £100. I found someone who has got copies for £25. If you want to contact me, I'll give you their details. Anyhow, I'll speak to you again soon. Hopefully might be after I've finally got my appointment and gone to see someone about my final tests. Anyhow, bye.